Okay, so now we're starting the next session, which will turn to art, actually, speaking of the previous question. There will be two presentations by artists. The first by Conny Karlsson Lundgren, standing here, who will be talking about Gothenburg Affairs. The Gothenburg Affairs. And then we will be joined by link by Sam Hultin, who is unfortunately not feeling great and joining us from Stockholm. And then there will be room for a conversation between you and them and us all. But now I will give the floor to to Conny Karlsson Lundgren, an artist who has been working with queer history in many different ways. For instance, he's the artist responsible for the LGBTQI monument in Gothenburg, the Glade, which is located close to Järntorget in that direction. It's in the little guide folder that you all got. I don't remember which number it is, but one of the little dots is the Glade. Please welcome Conny.
A small red naked light pulsates and pokes attention at 120 bpm, the same rate that the pulse reaches when aroused, or the same beat as disco and house music, the intoxicating light of love. The title of the piece is drawn from an article in the Gothenburg-based magazine VD from 1924. A pink-colored warm light, the intoxicating light of love, is how the infamous editor Bartol Lundén describes what he first encountered when he crashed a private party in Partille outside Gothenburg a winter evening the same year.
The festivities were hosted by the Karlsson brothers, who were part of a circle of gay men, or how Lundén chooses to describe them, a homosexual plague. Lundén ran the boulevard magazine VD during the 1920s, 1930s, and the tabloid was characterized by highly conservative entertainment and cultural journalism with a persistent anti-Semitic and homophobic language. On the wall in the exhibition space is a spread from the magazine, where the editor's description of the men's supposedly degenerate activities from the party are reproduced in a series of vivid snapshots. The homophobic language seems to reveal more complex feelings of fascination and desire, with an almost sensuous, poetic attention to details. Although Lundén felt that he had successfully completed his mission, he was evicted and thrown out from the party. Here, I rather see an early act of resistance in which the brothers find strength in the collective community and defend a private, intimate sphere. In the sparse scenography of the wallpaper and pulsating light, Prologue, the Gothenburg Affair, presents imaginary evidence material with three objects present at the party described by the editor in the article. Three still life photographs shaped and informed by both the playful still life genre of modernism and the emerging crime scene photography of the interwar period. The latter, a type of photography in which police officers are often seen pointing directly at the evidence. And the three objects are a pearl necklace with a title based on a quote from the article, "There were two sitting, cheek to cheek, with arms tenderly entwined around the tiny waist." A sailor cap with the title, "There another leaned his head so tenderly against his neighbor's chest." And finally, plums with cream, titled, "There was another pair that sat so tight, close to each other." As a performative gesture, I let my hand emphasize the essence of the still life images, the evidence through a modest movement, a caress, a way of touching history, tracing queer kinship. Prologue is the first half of the two-part installation and performative work, The Gothenburg Affair from 2021, commissioned by Hasselblad Foundation, and were shown in the two exhibitions, The New Eye and With New Eyes at Hasselblad and Göteborg Konsthall, both exhibitions with a focus on the interwar period and the emergence of lens-based media. However, these documentations are from Bonniers Konsthall in Stockholm earlier this year. The article is one of several in Lundgren's incitement to the city's emerging homosexual subcultures, where stricter actions by law enforcement is required. What can also be recognized between the lines is how well organized the parties, networks, and relationships seem to have been, as a haven for people with transgressive identities and sexual desires, with a new sense of self that seems to have grown firmly rooted in the art and culture of the time. These events would be the start of a much talked about trial against a circle of gay men a decade later. In 1937, the much publicized trial of a group of gay men in Gothenburg begins. 12 men stand trial, and they are referred to as kretsen, or the circle in English. It is one of the last major court cases before homosexual acts were decriminalized in Sweden in 1944. And during these years, brief erotic encounters were initiated in the city's public spaces and secret passages. But above all, the circle created a community during festivities in each other's homes, where stories, desires, and experiences were shared. They recited poetry for each other, listened to music, and danced together. They referred to each other by chosen female names: Viola, Olivia, Carmen, Rosa, Sarah, and Josephine. They described the relationship as a spiritual kinship. I spent hours in the regional state archive in Gothenburg, reading and transcribing court papers. The thoroughly mapped narratives are deeply influenced by the criminology and forensic psychiatry of the era, with attitudes and gazes recording bodies and behaviors that deviate from the norm of the time. As so often during my research, I had an intense bodily reaction to the narratives that materialized. I visualized the spatial performance and developed the script, a monologue based on the interrogations. The narratives were translated back and reimagined from the perspective of the accused. The performance takes place in a scenography made out of tables, a forensic chair, a speaker's chair, a record player, and once again the pulsating lamp, a nod to the previous work, Prologue. The performance becomes a way to embody, transform, and reimagine a set of historical records. Trigger words such as ejaculation, fornication, and semen, which were used by the police to signal offenses, were kept in the script as a way to emphasize the authorities' control. At the home of one of the accused men, the police found over 300 indecent photographs, which were used to identify several of the men in the circle. A selection of the erotic images serves as a choreographic score, traced and performed as a parallel layer with the narratives. The performer moves slowly through the fragmented scenography while delivering the monologue. His movements are hesitant, repetitive, almost dreamlike, and drawn from the not quite remembered. His body becomes a site for reclaiming the image's status as acts and objects of desire, rather than crimes. He's dressed in Swedish military underwear from the 1930s, a silky sleeveless top, silk socks covered by men's socks, white sneakers, and a pearl necklace. The double socks reference a practice of hiding feminine-coded clothing underneath masculine clothing. Pictured is Eva-Lisa Bengtson that performed the piece in Swedish. And in this excerpt we follow the testimony of backvision from a party of the home of Josephine, and here performed in English by Ido Grimberg.
In recent years, I've been to parties with several of the accused men in their homes. It was just a small circle gathering together. We addressed each other by female names. I'm called the Backfischen. During these parties, we're dressed in women's clothing, and there is food and wine, reading, singing, and expressive dancing to gramophone music. We feel a spiritual kinship with each other, seeing each other as lady friends. We could go on well into the night when everyone gets more or less intoxicated. Fornication does not occur during these parties, but we speak about it. I know many homosexual men in Gothenburg, but I'm all alone and by myself for the most part. At one of the parties last winter, I was offered to wear a white silk dress with a deep décolleté back. I usually don't like women's clothing, and I say to myself that even if I'm a homosexual, I should not be coquettish. The best attire is voted that night, and I win a prize, small silver cup. Everyone admires my back. Strangely enough, the dress gives me distaste for homosexual intercourse. It doesn't fit together. I'm good at expressive dancing, and I dance for the others. And we feel desire for caresses by men.
The performer's words from the man's testimonies speak of spiritual connections and expressive dancing. He speaks through both desire and denial, resting in details such as the image of an ecstatic kiss that turned into a bruise, or aroused bodies tasting of raspberry jam. Another nod to the previous prologue in the scenography is a new still life of imaginary evidence material, including literature referenced in the court papers. A few of these books were borrowed from the QRAB archive. Midway through the choreography, he stops and changes position from accused to accuser, and he activates materials on the tables in various ways. He flips over an IQ test, which was part of their forensic psychiatric evaluations, and he moves the lens over a spread from Ernst Kretschmer's book on the physiognomic classification system for body types, theories that significantly influenced criminology in Sweden in the interwar period. Towards the end, he reads from the forensic psychiatric protocols, describing the accused in sentences such as, I quote, "He is lean and aesthetic, he is quite narrow over the shoulders with a marked waist, and is strikingly wide over the hips." And the protocols highlight feminine appearances through subjective definitions of delicate and soft, while commenting on attributes such as wearing lady stockings or having inked eyebrows. In the final segment, the performer quotes the sentences imposed by the court on the 12 men. Before leaving the room, he starts the record player and returns to the choreography, now dancing to a new edit of the song Jazzgossen, the jazz boy in English, originally from 1922 by the artist Karl Gerhard. The lyrics describe an early subculture of men using feminine-coded attributes and expressions, and I imagine the song may have been played frequently at the circle's many parties. The new version was made by the duo Inaudible, and one of the members, Johan Sundell, presented here earlier today. Moving beyond just retelling the story as it appears in the archive and raising awareness of it, we feel a desire for caresses by men is an attempt at reimagine and embody a community of using erotics as resistance. If the court documents hold records of oppression and violence, my intention is one of care, a caress, a way of touching history and tracing queer kinship. So, last but not least, Gläntan, the Glade, the LGBTQI monument here in Gothenburg. At the end of last year, Swedish first LGBTQI+ monument Gläntan, or the Glade, was inaugurated. It is located on Esperantoplatsen in central Gothenburg. The square is full of contradictions, a place of joy, struggle, and community over the years, but also the site of hate crimes in the early 1990s. The monument is meant to remind people of the struggle for the rights of LGBTQI+ people today, yesterday, and tomorrow. The project was initiated after a proposal to Gothenburg art from the local grassroots movement and was launched with a solid pre-study and workshops together with local LGBTQI+ communities and archives in Gothenburg, such as QRAB and SACMI, who are also present this weekend, of course, and one of the projects is the beautiful My Queer Gothenburg, a sound work and audio guide by Sam Hultin, who will speak after me. A multitude of voices, lived realities, experiences, needs, and desires are meant to share space here. For many of us who are part of any of the communities that make up the glimmering LGBTQI+ spectrum, the closest we have in common is that we have been forced to appear on different social and political stages. I reflected on the space as an open and social stage. The monument is made up of several parts that reflect different times and places. In the middle are 3 layers in pink concrete that can be used as a meeting place and stage. Each layer represents a space from Gothenburg's queer history. None of the spaces remain today, but they are all depicted to scale, according to the original floor plans, placed on top of each other, following each room's cardinal points. The pink paving stone shows the layout of the dance floor of the nightclub Touch at Esperantoplatsen in the 80s and 90s. The nightclub was located in the same building as the non-profit Swedish Federation for LGBTQ+ rights. Here, bodies have moved through sweaty nights, and many social contacts and erotic encounters were formed over the years. The building also housed the organization's cafe, bookstore, and library, and was central to its efforts to prevent the spread of HIV and AIDS. Touch was the first gay club I visited as a newcomer to the city and a newly out teenage queer. The dance floor was moved a few meters from its original location and placed in the square. The middle layer shows the layout of the kitchen in the feminist collective Högst upp, or At the Top. The collective was housed in an apartment in Gothenburg from the 1970s up until 2017. And known for its openness, the collective hosted women, lesbians, queer feminists, and trans people as residents and visitors over the years. And one of the bathrooms contained the collective's shared notebooks, which became an open archive. The kitchen was the hub, where kitchen political meetings and other gatherings took place. And the top layer shows the bedroom of Josephine, whose home was one of several secret meeting places for gay men before homosexual acts were decriminalized. And the community at Josephine revolved around sharing experiences, desires, and stories, listening to music and dancing together. And several of those visiting Josephine refer to each other by chosen female names, and you might recognize the circle from my previous work. The entire location is framed by trees. As they grow, will enhance the intimacy of the glade. And this mirrors the numerous parks and cruising areas within the city that has provided alternative spaces to express desires, when other spaces have not been allowed to exist. In the background is the old entrance to Touch. On top of the uppermost layers are 3 pillows made of pink marble as a memorial to those who are not longer with us, with the imprints of lovers, friends, or close members of an extended family. And the pillows are depictions of real pillows from contemporary queers, collected through an open call, 3D scanned after a night's sleep and sculpted in marble. The pillows are a reminder of all the private lives and intimate desires that have been exposed and turned into politics in the fight for equal rights. Across the ground is a dotted brass line. This symbolized the movement, the root of the March for Equal Rights during the 1981 Gothenburg Liberation Weekend. The line ends where it begins. The line signifies an understanding of time as both a labyrinth and circular, that the struggle doesn't end. And during the inauguration, DJ Mamdou activated the dance floor by playing music in dialogue with Liz from DJ Tage, who used to play at the legendary club. Lina, who lived in the collective for many years, activated the kitchen by reading from the collective shared notebooks. And Eddie activated the bedroom with an excerpt from the previous performance depicting one of the many parties at Josephine's home. And together, the fragments from a new stage form a new stage in warm pink, where we can gather for political meetings, where we can date, make out, rest, talk, argue, remember, mourn, plan, fantasize, or dance together under the open sky. And the monument is an embodied manifestation of time as a way of touching history and tracing queer kinship. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam, for waiting. I don't know if Sam can hear us, but Sam will be able to talk, and we will be able to listen. So Sam Hultin has been working also with archives and queer history, like I said, and was instrumental in getting a very rich archive to Kurab from Eva-Lisa Bengtson, who we will hear more about in Sam's talk. So we are very grateful to Sam, not only for being here with us today, but for many other things as well. And I forgot to mention that after Sam's presentation, like I said, Conny will be back on stage, and also Malin Holgersson will moderate the discussion. So now you will listen to Sam.
Hello, I'm Sam Hultin. I'm an artist and I often work with exploring and activating queer histories. And I often do it together with the queer community. For example, I've made a series of queer-guided city walks in, for example, Tirana, Oslo, Belgrade, Stockholm, Malmö, Chisinau and Gothenburg. And the one in Gothenburg was made as part of the project that would lead up to Conny Karlsson Lundgren's wonderful queer monument in the city. The walks are based on stories told to me during interviews or written down during workshops with local queer communities. The stories both present a more official part of a place's queer history, like clubs, organizations, important events in the city's queer history. But the emphasis is on the personal memories from these places. The stories are also told in a first-person narrative to an imagined you that represents a queer friend, lover, or family member. Something that for me has become more important with time is also to give the community tools to develop the walks themselves and to do it without me. And this has also happened in Tirana, in Chisinau, and now also in Gothenburg, where a queer Mandarin-speaking network has made a walk of their own based on the project. Another project that sort of followed up on one of these walks was a number of lesbian sing-alongs that I conducted together with other queer musicians. We invited queers from different generations to learn each other's songs. And after one of these sing-alongs, I met Eva-Lisa Bengtson for the first time. We started talking, and after the sing-along, she said that she wanted to show me something. So we met up after a few days, and now I will, in a much shorter version, tell you and show you what she told and showed me that day.
Eva-Lisa Bengtson was born in Stockholm in 1932, and even if she at an early age understood that she was a girl and not a boy, it wasn't until 1964 that she dared to tell anyone about who she really was. And at this time, the word transsexualism was still quite unknown in Sweden, and here there were only a handful of doctors that had begun experimenting with what we today know as gender-affirming care. And there were no official meeting places for trans people. As you might know, RTSL didn't officially include trans people in the organization until 2001. But there were a number of porn magazines that at this time worked as relatively safe meeting places for trans people. And in one of them, Eva-Lisa saw a personal ad written by this person, Erika Sjöman, and together they started what would soon become Sweden's first club for what we today call trans people. And they called their club Lesbian. This is their first ad. And they had borrowed this name from an American magazine published by a person called Virginia Queens that I will mention in a little while. Their first party was held about a year after this at the Dutch embassy of all places. It's this like 17th century palace at Södermalm in Stockholm, of course built with blood money and so on, but still. After this, they get a more permanent meeting place, a dance studio that they call the Hall of Mirrors, because as you can see, one of the walls in this dance studio are covered with mirrors. And this becomes sort of an important meeting place, and this dance studio becomes sort of a catwalk for many of the people who up until now have only been able to dress up in the privacy of their own homes. And the people coming to the Hall of Mirrors, they mainly identify as transvestites, but today we might call the people who came to these parties acknowledging that they belong somewhere on the LGBTQI spectrum, but there were also sex workers coming and people with different BDSM and fetish practices. So these are some images in the parties. And after about a year, the organization FPINE, Foundation for Full Personality Expression, starts in Sweden. And this is a Swedish or Nordic branch of an American organization started by this person, Virginia Prince, who, as you might remember, started this or published this magazine, Transvestia. And the rules for membership in this organization were very strict. So you could just be a heterosexual transvestite. So you couldn't be gay, you couldn't be a woman, you couldn't be a transsexual person. So even if Eva-Lisa actually started or helped starting this organization, she in the late 60s sort of moved away from this trans movement that had now become the leading trans movement in Sweden. So instead, she. I also want to add this, that you might notice that Sweden was the first country in the world to make a new law that regulated people who wanted to change their legal gender in 1972. And as you might know, this was not pushed by activists or trans people themselves, but it was pushed by doctors and lawyers who wanted like order in the family lines. And of course, an important part or rule was that you had to be sterilized if you wanted to change your legal gender. And Eva-Lisa, who was both a transsexual and also a lesbian, she would, even if she got prescriptive hormones after a while, she would never change her legal gender because she could never live as a woman full time because her family couldn't accept her as a woman. So after she left this the trans movement, at least for a while in the late 60s, she got engaged in the Swedish or the Stockholm lesbian scene. For example, here at the Jerry's Ladies Club, or Värdestan Club, run by Jerry here to the left and their partner Märta on the bike. This is a photo from their wedding in 1963. And at this club, many of the people coming there have just like Jerry taken on a male name and have this masculine expression. We might call it butch today. Oh, you understand. But they don't use words like transvestite or transsexual, or at least not in this circle of people. And when also Eva-Lisa asked Jerry if more of her trans friends can come, Jerry makes sure that they get a key of their own so that they can use this space once a week as well. But she also gets involved in group Victoria and in Lesbian. And she's also an important part of this is from an action by Lesbian. And she's also an important part of starting Kvinnohuset, the women's house in Stockholm, as one of the few people with the practical skills to turn this old photo studio into this thriving headquarters for the feminist movement in Stockholm. She encountered a lot of transphobia during her life as an activist, maybe especially in the 90s, where there was I forgot to mention, she was also a part of the small group in the late 90s that started to push article to include trans people, which they eventually did. But yeah, in the 90s, there was a wave of transphobia that affected a lot of the lesbian and feminist groups in Sweden and in Stockholm. And as you can see in this ad for organization / bar, Lesbian, it was so wide to emphasize that they didn't include transsexual or transvestites. And one of the places that decided to exclude trans women in the mid 90s was also the Women's House. And this is the letter that she got in 96, where she was first greeted with her legal name, and she then told that the Women's House has decided not to welcome transsexual people anymore. But we also found places where she was welcome, like at the Adders Ladies Club or at Lash, the BDSM and Kink Club, or at Golden Ladies, RFSL's group for senior LGBT women. And despite her great importance for the queer movement in Sweden, relatively little has been written about Eva-Lisa or about the history of the trans movement at all, or in general. And this is, has to do with several things: transphobia, also the fact that Eva-Lisa couldn't be open in her daily life. But after we met the first time, I nagged her for about 6 months to let me conduct like proper film interviews, which she finally let me do. In the spring of 2017, and we got to know each other, and she called me like once a week, and she showed up every time I would have like an opening or a talk or whatever. But in the spring of 2018, she hadn't called me in a while, and I couldn't get hold of her. But because she had this, other life as a man, no one really knew where she lived. But because I knew some details about this other life, I could figure out her address. So I drove there, and I met this random neighbor who told me that, the man in the house just passed away. So that's how I, got to know that she had passed away. And after a while, I also got in touch with Eva-Lisa's daughter, who also told me that she had been buried under her legal maiden name, and of course without her big queer network of the friends. So after this, so shortly after this, we had a memorial service for Eva-Lisa at Artefacts for her queer friends. And after about 6 months, I drove and picked up this material that I knew that she had, and that the daughter said that she would otherwise have just thrown away when she cleaned out the house. And this is like half of it, so it's like 8 moving boxes. So when I go through them, I understood that she has, for more than 50 years, meticulously collected them and created this amazing archive with a material that is unique to Swedish trans history. And these are some samples. These are letters from trans people when they started transvestia, so it's from trans people all over Scandinavia. A lot of amazing photographs, records of meetings. So for the last 5 years, I've worked to make this archive and her story accessible for more people. So, for example, and I do it in a project that I call Eva-Lisa Monument. So I've done these city walks. We've done performative readings, me and other trans people in Stockholm. This is from the Modern Museum, all places also, but all these letters from trans people. I made a film, and this is from an anniversary celebration that was actually held in the building where they have their hall of mirrors, which the person who lives there today kindly just let us use. And now I'm in the like last stages of writing this book about Eva-Lisa and a little bit about my work in her archive that will come out in March next year. And I just found out that the Dutch embassy is letting us have the release party there. So if you happen to be in Stockholm in late March, email me and you will be invited to this party. And also, of course, I'm very grateful that Kira is also now taking care of her archive and making it accessible for more people. And I think what interests me in this archive is that it not only tells a story about a very important activist, but it also makes visible how ideas of gender and sexuality has changed during the course of Eva-Lisa's life, and also how that affects us today. And also how fear of losing power can lead to exclusion, but also, how it's also solidarity looks like in practice. Maybe I should talk it out so we have some room before a little conversation. So I will stop there.
My name is Malin Holgersson. Sam, do you still hear us?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. And we can hear you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sam and Conny. Let's do this then. I have prepared like 2 questions, but since we got a bit stressed, I thought of maybe invite you as an audience if you have questions first. Since you've been sitting here all day, so maybe you are eager to know something regarding this, and if not, then I will continue. But we have one question there.
Thank you so much.
for both of you for your presentations, but my question is for Sam. How did the negotiations go with the daughter? How was it possible to salvage and save the materials?
Sorry, can you repeat that? How did the negotiations
go with the daughter?
With the daughter? Okay, how I got the, yeah. So Eva-Lisa's, there was one person in Eva-Lisa's family who was very against, or who really couldn't accept Eva-Lisa's identity as a woman, but her daughter really had no issue with it. She was not so she's not so interested in it. She said that I have no interest in this material. I know it exists. If you want it, you can use it. Then it's important for me to say that also everything that I've done with this project, I have a continuous conversation with the daughter, and we also, so for me it's very important that she's okay with it, and she's just like, she has another experience of this person as, an absent father, so that's what she's dealing with, but she understands what I'm trying to do, and I understand her, feelings about it. So I think there's a good conversation about it, and yeah.
Okay, are you satisfied with that answer? Thank you, a good question, and it is a little bit, it connects to one of my questions, but is it someone else who wants to ask something? To Sam or Conny? No? Okay. Yeah, because when I look at your works next to each other like this today, there is this difference that Sam has worked based on a specific person who was actually also alive when you started the work, Sam, your work, and Conny, you have not. So does it require different ways of working with archive materials when you work not based on a specific person, or if you do that? So Sam, Conny, you choose who will answer the questions first.
Of course, it's different. It can also, like for me, I've been working like a lot with archive material and ephemera and leftovers and residues and stuff like that. And I can mention just briefly one project that I did about our trip to, it's called Our Trip to France, and it's about the Red Faggot movement based here in Gothenburg that actually traveled to France in the late 70s. And during the research for that project, I couldn't find any living members of those four that actually went there, which was kind of stressful, of course, but I continued to work with the material. I knew that two of them had passed. But then I did an exhibition earlier this year at Bonniers Konsthall in Stockholm, and suddenly during that exhibition, or the preview for that exhibition, I found out that one of them, or two of them, were still alive, and I got to actually lived in Stockholm. So we had coffee, and we looked at the film together, and they didn't know about the project, and it was like so bizarre to okay, so I'm showing you all this material now that is like very, very private, because it's made out of like travel journals, but they published it in public, like for themselves or in the community. But still, for Torsten is his name, for him to see his own words from 1978 coming alive through sort of a more contemporary queer community was, of course, kind of stressful, but it was also sort of a interesting, beautiful moment. I think I cried more. Actually, I cried. He didn't, but it was really, really nice moment. So I think that was like really weird that a project completely shifted nature when it was actually finished, or it's not finished. I'm continuing working actually with that material, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Will you have Torsten in it? Are you gonna like do interviews with them?
Yeah, probably. We're like started to do discussion because the trip to France continued in France, and a few of them actually went to Paris after this gay community, this festival or camp in the countryside. So yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you, Conny. Sam, do you remember the question? You do, I think.
Yeah, I just got the question now from Pia because it's breaking up a bit.
Do you want me to repeat it? No. Yeah. Go ahead.
The ethical aspect is a bit different. I mean, if someone is still alive, or at least if they have a lot of friends and family who's still alive, there's I guess a lot of more conversations that need to be had, because I mean, even things that I haven't really thought that they would be sensitive, but some details can be so important for people to get right, which is something that you might not think of. And of course, if it's something that people are still affected by today, it gets more sensitive, and you have to put in a lot of more work, I guess, with these, to have these important conversations, so that you don't hurt anyone, basically.
Did you adjust parts of your work?
I just heard if I adjusted something.
Yeah, exactly. If someone...
I can say just when I'm writing the book, I'm in the middle of this like fact-checking and also checking in with the people that I mentioned, because some people, are alive today. And I have made a lot of people anonymous. I have also changed some facts. So for me, it's important that everyone who is mentioned in the book is okay with that. Of course, people who treat Eva-Lisa very badly, like the people that wrote this letter to her, for example, I've never mentioned them with name, because I'm not interested in hänga ut from. I'm not interested to attack someone, a specific person. I'm more interested in what structures made these things possible. So yeah, I'm not interested in it's not about the specific people really. It's about how our society and our community can handle these issues. So yeah, I'm adjusting.
Okay, thank you, Sam. I was just about to say that our time has now ran out, but now Olof said if someone wants to ask something and continue some minutes, it's okay. Otherwise, this conversation ends now, so that you can have coffee. I don't know, do you want... Yeah, I think you need coffee. Thank you so much, Conny and Sam, for sharing your experiences and also giving us amazing examples of how to stage and also activating archive materials. You mentioned that in the talk earlier, so thank you so much.
Thank you. I can just mention, I hope that all of you who wants to go to the variety show tonight has gotten their tickets. If not, the last chance is during this break.